The Judge-President Mbenenge Mengo scandal. A judicial betrayal in the hallowed halls of justice. Where integrity is paramount, a shadow looms. A case that has captivated the nation, challenging the very foundations of our legal system. This is the story of Ndiswa Mengo and Judge-President Selby Mbenenge. The story begins in January 2023, when Ndiswa Mengo, a 37-year-old court secretary from the Eastern Cape High Court, stepped forward with grave accusations against Judge-President Selby Mbenenge. Her complaints were stark, sexual harassment, spanning from June 2021 to November 2022. It was an explosive revelation that threatened to expose the dark underbelly of the South African judicial system. For many, the case was more than just an individual's fight for justice. It became a battle against the abuse of power and privilege. Mengo detailed a pattern of inappropriate behavior. Text messages, calls, and unwanted physical advances allegedly made by Mbenenge, a man at the pinnacle of legal power in the province, all pointed to a deeply entrenched culture of harassment. Mengo's courage in coming forward ignited a firestorm of both support and backlash, forcing the country to reckon with uncomfortable truths about gender, power, and authority within its legal institutions. Her testimony was clear and detailed. She spoke of receiving suggestive WhatsApp messages, requests for personal meetings, and one particularly disturbing incident of indecent exposure, which she claims occurred in November 2022. The allegations were shocking. The setting was supposed to be a place of professionalism, where individuals were meant to be treated with respect and dignity. Instead, Mengo painted a picture of an environment where those in power took advantage of their positions, making their subordinates feel small and vulnerable. The bravery of Mengo to file a formal complaint against Mbenenge, a senior judicial figure, was not without its challenges. She faced immense emotional distress and the fear of being ostracized or dismissed. But her decision to speak out opened the door to a full investigation, a process that would prove to be a long and arduous journey. As news of the allegations spread, many were left wondering how such a breach of conduct could have occurred in a professional setting. After all, the judiciary is meant to be a bastion of integrity and justice. How could the very individuals entrusted with upholding the law engage in such behavior? The missing evidence. A crucial element of the case was the disappearance of the CCTV footage from November 15, 2022. The day Mengo alleged that Mbenenge exposed himself to her in his office. According to the protocols, footage from the surveillance cameras should have been preserved, especially given the seriousness of the claims. However, the footage was mysteriously missing. This raised immediate concerns about the handling of evidence and the possibility of foul play. The disappearance of this footage became one of the most significant issues in the case. It cast a shadow over the investigation, raising questions about the integrity of the process and whether the evidence had been tampered with. Was it simply an error, or was there an intentional effort to cover up the incident? The lack of the CCTV footage made it difficult to verify Mengo's account of the events, adding a layer of complexity to an already challenging case. Forensic experts noted that once the footage is downloaded, it is susceptible to tampering. It was a simple, yet crucial, mistake, one that could have significant consequences. The missing footage was not just a minor technical error. It was a critical piece of evidence that could have potentially corroborated Mengo's testimony. Mengo, however, did not let this setback deter her. Despite the missing evidence, her detailed account of the events, along with the digital records that could be traced back to Mbenenge, remained a vital part of her case. The digital trail. One of the key pieces of evidence that bolstered Mengo's claims was the digital trail left behind in the form of WhatsApp messages. A forensic analysis of her phone revealed 855 messages exchanged between Mbenenge and Mengo. Out of these, 275 messages had been deleted. Though some of the deleted messages could not be fully recovered, the remaining messages, when examined, revealed a disturbing pattern of behavior. The nature of the messages exchanged between Mbenenge and Mengo painted a clear picture of inappropriate conduct. Many of the communications were of a suggestive nature, and there were several instances where Mbenenge allegedly crossed professional boundaries by sending personal, and in some cases, explicit messages. Mengo's response to these messages ranged from polite indifference to subtle rejection, but Mbenenge's persistence did not cease. It was clear that the power imbalance played a critical role in this interaction. Mengo, an employee under his authority, felt unable to fully confront him or reject him outright without fear of retaliation. A particularly disturbing aspect of the digital trail was the presence of explicit images, which Mengo claimed were sent by Mbenenge without her consent. One image, in particular, raised alarms for its graphic nature. The forensic investigation into the authenticity of this image was met with technical difficulties, but the message was clear: Mbenenge's actions went beyond simple flirtation. They were violations of Mengo's autonomy and dignity. Despite the missing footage and some gaps in the digital evidence, the messages that remained, along with Mengo's testimony, provided a compelling case of harassment. The question, however, remained: how would this evidence be interpreted in a court of law? The power dynamics at the heart of this case lies the fundamental issue of power. Mbenenge, with his decades of experience and high position within the legal system, held a significant amount of authority over Mengo, a relatively junior court secretary. In environments like this, where hierarchies are firmly established, the line between consensual interaction and coercion can easily become blurred. Power dynamics play a critical role in cases of sexual harassment. When an individual in a position of authority uses their power to manipulate or intimidate others, it becomes difficult for the victim to speak out without facing repercussions. Mengo, who worked directly for Mbenenge, was vulnerable to retaliation if she resisted or rejected his advances. This was a classic case of abuse of power, where Mbenenge, as the judge-president, used his influence to exploit his subordinate. For Mengo, coming forward was not just an act of courage, it was a massive risk. She risked her career, her reputation, and her personal well-being. Yet, despite these challenges, she chose to speak out, driven by a desire for justice and the hope that her actions would prevent others from suffering the same fate. The legal system, however, does not always operate in a way that provides protection for those who are vulnerable. Mengo's case highlights the need for structural reforms within the judiciary, ensuring that individuals are not subjected to such abuse. It also underscores the importance of having robust mechanisms in place to report and investigate allegations of harassment, particularly when the accused holds significant power. The Judicial Conduct Tribunal was convened to investigate the allegations against Mbenenge. The tribunal was tasked with determining whether Mbenenge's actions violated the ethical standards expected of a judge. Mengo's testimony, along with the available evidence, would be presented in this forum, and both sides would have the opportunity to argue their case. The process of giving testimony was an emotionally taxing experience for Mengo. She was subjected to several days of cross-examination, where her every word and action were scrutinized in detail. For someone who had already suffered significant trauma, the experience was grueling. Many observers criticized the harshness of the cross-examination, noting that it seemed designed to discredit Mengo and undermine her credibility. Cross-examinations in such sensitive cases can often re-traumatize victims, and many legal experts argued that the tribunal's approach could have been more empathetic and supportive. On the other side, Mbenenge denied the allegations, asserting that the interactions with Mengo were consensual. He claimed that any suggestive messages or actions were misunderstood or misrepresented. His legal team worked tirelessly to poke holes in the evidence presented by Mengo, arguing that the messages could have been taken out of context or deleted for personal reasons unrelated to the case. The tribunal's proceedings were closely watched by the public. For many, this case was more than just about Mengo and Mbenenge. It was a test of the judicial system's integrity and its ability to hold its own members accountable. The question on everyone's mind was whether the tribunal would be willing to confront the truth, no matter how uncomfortable or damaging it might be to the reputation of the judiciary. The public outcry as news of the case spread, the public's reaction was divided. On one hand, there was an outpouring of support for Mengo. Women's rights groups, activists, and members of the public rallied behind her, urging the authorities to take the allegations seriously and to ensure that justice was served. For many, Mengo's bravery in coming forward was seen as an act of defiance against a system that too often silenced the voices of victims. On the other hand, there were those who doubted Mengo's claims, questioning the validity of the evidence and the motivations behind her allegations. Some argued that Mengo's actions were part of a broader campaign to tarnish Mbenenge's reputation, while others suggested that she had misinterpreted the nature of their interactions. The case sparked intense debates about gender, power, and justice in South Africa. It highlighted the pervasive culture of harassment and abuse that still exists in many sectors, particularly those where power imbalances are prominent. For many, this case was a wake-up call, a reminder that even the most trusted individuals in society can exploit their positions for personal gain. The Mbenenge Mengo case has far-reaching implications for the South African legal system. It raises crucial questions about accountability within the judiciary and the mechanisms in place to protect those who work within it. The case has exposed significant gaps in the way sexual harassment is handled and has called into question the level of transparency and oversight within the judiciary. For South Africa, this case represents a turning point. It is an opportunity to examine the structures that allow abuse to flourish unchecked and to reform those systems to ensure that justice is not only done but seen to be done. It is a call to action for everyone, from those in power to those on the ground, to take responsibility for creating a system where victims are believed, supported, and protected. As the tribunal continues its work, the nation watches closely. The outcome of this case will send a message about the values we hold dear as a society and the lengths we are willing to go to in order to ensure that justice prevails.